Scientists have studied the red planet and learned many facts about Martian geology and weather. Nevertheless, as you're about to find out, there's still much that we don't know about the red planet and its past. Phobos has always been considered a rather mysterious object, as has its smaller twin, Deimos. Joseph Shklovsky, a member of the Soviet Academy of Science, calculated from the estimated density of the Martian atmosphere and the acceleration of Phobos that the moon must be hollow. Evidence for this arose in July of 1988 when the Russians launched two unmanned planetary probes, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. Phobos 1 was lost en route 2 months later, reportedly because of radio command error. Phobos 2 was also lost under the most intriguing circumstances, but not before it had beamed back certain images and information from the planet Mars itself. Phobos 2 arrived safely at Mars in January of 1989. It entered into orbit around Mars as the first step towards its ultimate goal, to transfer an orbit that would make it fly almost in tandem with the Martian moonlet called Phobos, and explore the moon with equipment that included 2 packages of instruments to be placed on the surface of the moon Phobos. The mission was successful until Phobos 2 aligned itself with the Martian moon. Then, on the 28th of March, the Soviet Mission Control Center acknowledged sudden communication problems with the spacecraft. TASS, the official Soviet news agency, reported that Phobos 2 had failed to communicate with Earth as scheduled after completing an operation around the Martian moon Phobos. Scientists at Mission Control were unable to establish radio contact. The probe revealed anomalies on the surface of Mars, heat radiation leakage in a perfect geometrical shape running parallel one to one another directly along the equator and on the face of Mars. Another anomaly was also found on one of the last transmissions from Phobos 2. It was a photograph of a gigantic cylindrical object, a huge, approximately 20-kilometer long, 1.5-kilometer diameter, cigar-shaped mothership that was photographed on the 25th of March, 1989. After that last frame was radio transmitted back to Earth, the probe mysteriously disappeared. According to the Russians, it was destroyed, possibly knocked out with an energy pulse beam. So what was it that collided or crashed into Phobos 2? Was the space probe shot out of space for seeing too much? What does the last secret frame show? Popovich was associated with the controversial frames being smuggled out of top-secret files, and although they've not been publicly released, it's believed, however, that the frames have been shown to US and British officials. The cigar-shaped craft in the penultimate frame taken by Phobos 2 is apparently the object casting the oblong shadow on the surface of Mars in an earlier photo. In October of 1989, Soviet scientists published a series of technical reports on the experiments Phobos 2 did manage to conduct. The report confirms that the spacecraft was spinning either because of a computer malfunction or because Phobos 2 was impacted by an unknown object shortly before contact was lost. With so much information coming out about Mars, we must ask ourselves, what's going on? If we are to believe that Phobos is an artificial structure, then who is using it and for what purpose? Remote viewing Mars. The Stargate project was one of multiple programs that the US government undertook to examine non-material science and psi phenomena like telepathy and telekinesis. It ran for more than 2 decades, and a lot of information regarding the program has since been declassified and opened for public viewing. The program was used multiple times for successful intelligence collection, as outlined in a paper published after the declassification in 1995. One of the participants in that program was Joseph McMoneagle, a now retired Army veteran who was involved in the remote viewing program. Remote viewing is also tied in with precognition, and future events have been successfully predicted. One example involves a Soviet Tu-22 bomber that was outfitted as a reconnaissance aircraft, lost in Zaire in 1979, then located by an Air Force remote viewer. According to Carter, a woman went into a trance and gave some latitude and longitude figures. We focused our satellite cameras on that point, and the plane was there. Another example is Ingo Swann, McMoneagle's colleague, a man who was able to successfully describe and view a ring around Jupiter that scientists had no idea even existed. This took place precisely before the first ever flyby of Jupiter by NASA's Pioneer 10 spacecraft, which confirmed that the ring did exist. To determine whether it was necessary to have a beacon individual at the target site, Swann suggested carrying out an experiment to remote view the planet Jupiter before the upcoming NASA Pioneer 10 flyby. In that case, much to his chagrin and ours, he found a ring around Jupiter and wondered if perhaps he had remote viewed Saturn by mistake. Our colleagues in astronomy were quite unimpressed as well until the flyby revealed that an unanticipated ring did in fact exist. Joe McMoneagle explained how he detected shadows of people, fragments, on Mars and was picking up on a memory of people once existing there. He said he found evidence of giant structures, pyramids, and an ancient people trying to survive, people who had sent out someone to look for a new home. He also had visions of tall, thin, humanoid beings. We're talking about a highly skilled Army remote viewer coming from a very successful program. Simply put, remote viewing can work, which is why the US government uses it. General Stubblebine, a retired United States Major General who was also the commanding general of the US Army Intelligence and Security Command, INSCOM, also supported and involved himself in these programs. He once told the world that Army remote viewers were able to find structures on Mars. There are structures on the surface of Mars. I'll tell you for the record that there are structures underneath the surface of Mars that cannot be seen by the Voyager cameras that went by in 1976. I will also tell you that there are machines on the surface of Mars, and there are machines under the surface of Mars that you can look at, you can find out in detail, and you can see what they are, where they are, who they are, and a lot of detail about them. Among the many photographs taken in 1976 by the Viking orbiter are the two of a region known as Cydonia at latitude 40° north, which includes what looks like a human face, roughly 2.5 kilometers long, 2 kilometers wide, and up to 940 meters. Science fiction writers have long looked at the theme of artifacts being placed at strategic places in the solar system by an alien race in order that someday, when our species had advanced technology, it would uncover these relics and perhaps go on to contact their creators. The film and novel 2001: A Space Odyssey, with its enigmatic black monoliths, put this idea firmly on the map of possible future scenarios. And for some, with the discovery of the face on Mars, that speculation has become fact, a quarter of a century ahead of schedule. The face was first noticed in July of 1976 by NASA personnel and promptly dismissed as a trick of light and shadow when shown to journalists at a press conference in California. 3 years later, computer engineers Vincent DiPietro and Gregory Molinar, under contract at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, took a fresh interest in Viking frame 35A72, which had been filed away under the label Head, and a second frame 70A13, on which DiPietro found another image of the face, under different lighting conditions, taken 35 days after the first. Also on frame 70A13, the attention of the two researchers was drawn to what appeared to be a five-sided pyramid about 800 meters high and 3 kilometers long, located 16 kilometers from the face. The images on both frames were processed by DiPietro and Molinar using a new software technique they devised. Their conclusion? The face and the pyramid were hard to reconcile with any naturally formed objects. In mainstream scientific circles, DiPietro and Molinar's published findings were largely ignored. However, former NASA consultant Richard Hoagland, whose unorthodox views had increasingly distanced him from most planetary scientists, was intrigued. To the southwest of the face, he pointed out a remarkable rectilinear arrangement of massive structures interspersed with several smaller pyramids. In 1988, Mark Carlotto, another computer specialist, processed the Viking images using a method called shape from shadowing. From an analysis of the shadows cast by the face in the two Viking pictures, he came up with a three-dimensional reconstruction of its profile. He then processed this to find out how the face would appear from different directions and with the sunlight falling on it from various angles. There are many examples of rock formations on Earth that look like human heads, but only from certain directions. In the case of the Martian face, Carlotto concluded that it continues to look like a face from whichever direction it's viewed. Moreover, he claimed the image enhancement indicates that a second eye socket may be present on the right, shadowed side of the face. Fine structure in the mouth suggests that teeth are apparent. Several best-selling books and many articles have been written which makes much of the significance of the face. Even the loss of the Mars Observer spacecraft in August 1993 was attributed by some believers to a cover-up to hide the discovery of Martian life. Alternative 3 began as a science documentary broadcast on British television by Anglia Television in June 1977 and beamed to several other countries in Europe and to Australia, New Zealand, but not to the US. Alternative 3 was the last in a series of documentaries called The Science Report. It began with the investigators researching an alleged brain drain in Britain. In this case, the brain drain refers to talented individuals, such as scientists and biologists, disappearing. Further research focused on their allegedly being taken off to work in secretive locations. More investigation revealed that the Earth's environment is undergoing great change due to greenhouse gases, and that a top-secret effort is underway to move small numbers of human population to safe locations. According to an alleged British scientist, the authorities have long known that the global environment was deteriorating so seriously that 3 radical solutions or alternatives were contemplated.
If you're wondering what this sort of story, important and even tragic though it may be, has to do with Science Report, Well, we have to go back in time some 18 months, when we began work on another film which examined the scientific brain drain from Britain.
Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope, where, although no one realized it at the time, the second part of our complex story was beginning to unfold.
The near side of the moon's surface, the side visible to us here on Earth. The flags indicate acknowledged landings of American and Soviet craft. Among the spaceships the Russians sent up was the Vostok, supposedly not intended to reach the moon's surface. But in 1972, this sighting was recorded.
More detail, please. Can you give more detail on what you are seeing?
Alternative 1 was to put a stop to environmental degradation and use extreme measures, such as atomic blasts in the Earth's atmosphere, to allow greenhouse gases to escape. Alternative 2 was to move enough of the population to safe underground sites to ensure continuity of government and national survival. Alternative 3 was the most radical, establish bases on Mars and move some of the population there to ensure the survival of humanity. Nearly 40 years later, the world is hurtling towards destruction. Mysterious disappearances continue. In the last 20 years, 4.5 million people have vanished off the face of the Earth. Why? Is this because of Alternative 3? Many whistleblowers have come forward in the last 20 years with claims of secret bases on Mars. The end of this documentary is the subject of much debate. It shows the view through a window of some kind of flying vehicle that's flying over the surface of Mars. You see a blue sky and you can hear American and Russians in the background cheer that they have found life on Mars when they see a small burrowing animal on the ground. Many researchers suggest this is actual footage of Mars. In an attempt to find out if the theories in Alternative 3 were true, Avon Brooks was contacted, the American publisher. They said the book was out of print in the States. They then called Penguin Books in London and found that it was listed on their non-fiction list. A senior editor there told the researcher that it was officially classified as fiction based on fact. They wrote to the author himself, Leslie Watkins, to try to get the real story, and here's the letter he sent us. Dear Miss Dietrich, thank you for your letter, which reached me today. Naturally, I'm delighted by your interest in Alternative 3 and by the fact that you plan to sell it in the Windward's bookstore. I will certainly cooperate in any way I can. The correct description of Alternative 3 was given to you by the representative from Penguin Books. The book is based on fact. Was Alternative 3 intended to disclose to the public a truth that was too shocking to be announced through conventional political channels? NASA has a long and curious history regarding the real Mars, and certainly its color. Perhaps the most infamous account is of the controversy that still swirls around the release by JPL over a quarter century ago of the first true color Viking lander image, just one day after Viking touched down in the pre-dawn darkness of July 20th, 1976. Within a few hours of that historic publication, the release of the first color photograph from the surface of Mars, another hurriedly revised version of this first color surface image was suddenly produced, correcting the initial color engineering problems in the first image. Decades later, one of those personally present at JPL would relate a very different story of this incident. The witness is the son of the scientist in charge of one of Viking's 3 historic biology investigations, the labeled release experiment, principal investigator Dr. Gilbert Levin. His son's name is Dr. Ron Levin, now also a scientist, a physicist at MIT. In the summer of 1976, when Viking landed, Ron was a newly graduated high school student assisting his father at JPL. The following is from Levin's first-hand recollections of the remarkable overreaction by JPL that occurred in response to Ron Levin's naive efforts to correct the color. He would later say that it was a deliberate, if perplexing, methodical distortion of the incoming Viking lander data. According to De Gregorio's narrative, at about 2 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the first color image from the surface of another planet, Mars, began to emerge on the JPL color video monitors. Gil and Ron Levin sat in the main control room where dozens of video monitors and anxious technicians waited to see this historic first color picture. As the image developed on the monitors, the crowd of scientists, technicians, and media reacted enthusiastically to a scene that would be unforgettable: Mars in color. The image showed an Arizona-like landscape: blue sky, brownish-red desert soil, and gray rocks with green splotches. 2 hours after the first color image appeared on the monitors, a technician abruptly changed the image from the light blue sky and Arizona-like landscape to a uniform orange-red sky and landscape. Ron Levin looked in disbelief as the technician went from monitor to monitor, making the change. Minutes later, Ron followed him, resetting the colors to their original appearance. Levin and Strat were interrupted when they heard someone being chastised. It was Ron Levin being chewed out by the Viking project director himself, James S. Martin, Jr. Gil Levin went immediately and asked, "What's going on?" Martin had caught Ron changing all the color monitors back to their original settings. He warned Ron that if he tried something like that again, he'd be thrown out of JPL for good. The director then asked a TRW engineer assisting the biology team, Ron Gilgee, to follow Ron Levin around to every color monitor and change it back to the red landscape. What Gil Levin, Ron, and Patricia Strott did not know is that the order to change the colors came directly from the NASA administrator himself, Dr. James Fletcher. The JPL Viking imaging team technician would later admit he had instructions from the Viking imaging team to tweak all monitors so the Mars landscape would appear red. Just why NASA would change the true colors of Mars has been debated for decades. The best and most obvious reason is that they want us to think the planet is dead when it isn't. We've all heard about a project to Mars. It's been all over the news. The project is to send a group of well-versed individuals to the red planet to cultivate it. It was known going into the project that this would be a one-way trip, given how long it would take to get there. Still, thousands signed up, and NASA was left to start narrowing the field as to who would be the ones chosen to take this first known trip from the Earth to Mars by any individual. But what if it turned out that this wasn't the first time NASA went to Mars? What if it happened before, only we weren't told about it? In September 2016, NASA scientist Jeffrey Sheehy, who's the Senior Technology Officer of NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate, stated that although the technology did exist to reach Mars as far back as the 1970s, the technology to maintain a human presence on the Martian surface to justify the mission didn't. Some people, however, believe that only the first part of that statement is true. Around a year before Lansdorp's announcement, Italian UFO researcher Luca Scantamburlo released a report of a manned mission to Mars back in 1973. He claimed that the information had come to him via a whistleblower and pilot on the alleged mission, William Rutledge. There had been several information-gathering missions to Mars between 1970 and 1972, according to Rutledge. All launched from secret locations in South America and were joint efforts between America and the Soviet Union. The 1973 mission's sole purpose was to land on the Red Planet. The crew consisted of Rutledge himself, Commander Elliot C., and Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Ilyushin. Shortly after this release of information by Scantamburlo, a 3-minute piece of footage appeared on the internet. It was claimed to be leaked video of the 1973 mission to Mars aboard the ISV Columbus. While the footage could be a hoax, it does have an air of authenticity about it. At the very least, it's impressive footage. As for the claims made by Rutledge, perhaps his response to the whistleblower sums it up best when he said, "What can NASA or the USAF do now? Blocking or suing me would be an acknowledgement. They can speak of hoax or fiction." Although less credible than Rutledge and Scantamburlo, a woman named only as Jackie claimed live on air on Coast to Coast Radio in 2014 that she had seen with her own eyes humans on Mars in 1979 while she'd been an employee with NASA. Her job was to download streaming data, describing herself as being part of NASA's downstairs team. She claimed that via a live feed she witnessed men in spacesuits walking on the surface of the Red Planet. It's been a long-running rumor that NASA and other such bodies are vastly further ahead than they admit. Their capabilities in space travel and technology is arguably far beyond what the public realizes. It isn't too much of a stretch of the imagination to think that perhaps these types of missions were going on in secret. There's an increasing number of people across the world who believe that NASA's rovers never left the Earth in the first place, and the pictures they're allegedly sending back from Mars are taken in remote areas of our planet. Technologists, physicists, and others have a difficult time grasping that we have the capabilities to send a robot to a location that's 250 million kilometers away and then to remotely control it. To add some basic math, it'd take you 32 years to get to Mars if you were traveling 800 kilometers per hour. And yes, the said rover robot is allegedly sending pictures back to Earth with only a 14-minute delay. But if NASA's rovers are not on Mars, then where exactly are they? First, evidence suggests that the pictures that we see on NASA's website are not even taken by the Curiosity or Opportunity rovers. It's very possible that by now both rovers are stored in a hangar somewhere at NASA's JPL headquarters and have been replaced by their smaller and more practical baby brothers. Sure, if needed, they can always be taken out for a spin, but other than that, these smaller rovers are more convenient to work with. One of the known locations where NASA is playing around with these small rovers is Devon Island, Canada. Add a red tint to it and you have Mars. NASA's claim is that they needed a place where they can simulate the conditions on Mars. But wouldn't you need to simulate those conditions with the actual huge rovers and not with something that looks like a toy? Their shape, size, and weight are different, and the wheels are worlds apart. Using tiny rovers for simulations makes it impossible to make even remotely accurate tests. They also don't have the onboard laboratories, so what is there to simulate? Except for taking pictures, the tiny rovers look useless. NASA employs dozens and dozens of graphic experts, many of which have $150,000 salaries. Still, the amateur mistakes their graphic artists are constantly making raise quite a few eyebrows. The problem for the US Photoshop agency is that there are many graphic artists who are better than those working at NASA. As a result, NASA's been caught copying and pasting rocks and Martian terrain literally hundreds of times. This is an alleged picture taken on Mars showing what appears to be a rat. The mainstream called it the Martian rat. It's an Arctic lemming commonly found on, you guessed it, Devon Island in Canada. How easy is it to take a photo of any place look like Mars? Apparently very easy. A graphic artist needed only a few minutes to take a random photo in Ireland that even has a road and a white van on it. He then blurred the van, added reddish tint to the land and sky, and made it look barren and remote, just like Mars. To make a point, he even added a portion of the rover in the lower left corner of the edited picture, making it indistinguishable from the pictures released by NASA. We might think that NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has seen all there is to see on the Martian surface in the 11 years that it's orbited our closest neighbor. But a snapshot taken on the south pole of the planet has revealed something that scientists cannot explain. While the entire surface of the planet is covered with several depressions and craters, a vast pit located between the so-called Swiss cheese land, which is a product of the melting of frozen carbon dioxide, appears to be a little deeper than the average hole. Astronomers are still uncertain as to what might have caused it. Many things can make holes in the rocky terrain of Mars. More than 500,000 meteorite impacts have left craters, collapsing lava tubes have created deep wells, the ancient floods have plucked giant gulfs, and volcanic activity has melted the ice to leave large funnels. In summer at the south pole of Mars, the sun is low enough in the sky to accentuate shadows over the landscape, causing subtle features to be shown in the light. A quick flash of light was all that was needed to reveal ice at the bottom of the hole. Around the pit are patches of frozen carbon dioxide. Circles on ice are thought to have occurred due to the dry ice that's been sublimated in the gas due to the summer sun, leaving what astronomers called the Swiss cheese land. The image was taken using the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter high-resolution imaging science experiment, which allows researchers to see objects on Mars that are larger than 1 meter in size from approximately 200 to 400 kilometers above. That means the hole is not small. At 50 centimeters per pixel, we're seeing a feature hundreds of meters in diameter. Here's a high-resolution image from the NASA website. So the question is, did something pierce the surface, or is it a collapse of some kind? Without further information, it's difficult to say anything, but NASA will certainly be discussing all the possibilities and not tell us anything about it as usual. The Mars rover orbiter has been in the Martian orbit since March 2006, sending detailed images of the surface of the red planet that reveal a dynamic environment of dust devils, sand dunes, and occasional pieces of technology coming from Earth. After completing all of its main objectives in the first 2 years and 2 extensions of its mission, the orbiter is still going. No doubt in the future we may see even stranger holes than this. In April of 2014, Randy Kramer, also known as Captain K USMC Special Section, came forward to disclose some fascinating events that took place when he was just 17 years of age in 1987. Randy states that during sleep one night, two men in black came out of the bright light and physically took him from his bedroom. What happens next was an extremely fascinating yet strange event. Randy said he was taken to a place where some 40 other young adults were present. They too had been taken. They all boarded a triangular spaceship which took them into space. As the craft left our atmosphere, the group was told to look out the window to see the curve of the Earth as they left it behind. They were told that their mission was to protect Earth. Randy states the craft landed on the moon, where he observed many structures dome-shaped along with tall buildings. The story correlates to many other reports of a base camp on the far side of the moon. Apollo astronauts also claim to have seen this camp. The bizarre story doesn't end there. Randy Kramer claims he then boarded another flight which took him to Mars. When he exited the craft, he said he knelt down and scooped up a handful of the Earth just to prove to himself it was a real event. He states that the atmosphere on Mars is breathable and temperature could get quite warm at times. Randy claims to have spent 17 years on Mars, 3 years in a secret space fleet. Randy's 17 years on Mars were spent protecting 5 top-secret colonies. Randy claims he was part of the Earth Defense Force, which guarded 5 colonies of human beings. Strange as this all might seem, others have come forward with similar details. Randy awoke back in his bed knowing something had taken place, and yet he had no memory of what had transpired. He was aware, however, he felt older in himself, even though physically nothing had changed. He appeared to be the same 17-year-old youth, yet he certainly didn't feel the same. It was only later, when memories started coming back to him, that he realized he'd been part of the secret mission set up by the secret space military program, which was established to protect the Earth. Randy says that between the ages of 27 and 30, he began to get glimpses of what had occurred earlier in his lifetime. He claims to have been truly shocked as the memories unfolded. Many people have asked him why it was a 20-year tour of duty, to which he replied it was because we're very expensive. As incredible as these claims appear to be on the surface, it's now believed that what Randy Kramer experienced was time travel. Like a wormhole, this enabled them to travel to and from Earth and Mars in a short period of time. A new Area 51 is thought to be ground zero for intergalactic space missions. Recent satellite imagery dated June 30th appears to show a new giant hangar. Mystery continues to surround this military base. One of the more fascinating aspects of Andrew Basiago's mind-bending story is that at one point he'd forgotten most of it. It wasn't until the late 1990s that he says he started to remember blocked memories of his experiences as a child and young adult in the U.S. time-space program, and he says he spent the next 10 years researching them. Basiago claims he became personally involved in the U.S. time-space program in 1967 and 1968, when his father took him on some test runs through an energetic Tesla array, making Andrew the first American child ever to teleport. According to Basiago, Project Pegasus was developing and experimenting primarily with 2 different types of quantum access teleportation technologies: Tesla teleportation and time travel technology, and a technology called chronovision, which allows one to view and/or enter holographic images from past or future events. After his experiences in Project Pegasus in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Basiago would become involved again with the U.S. time-space program in the early 1980s as part of the CIA's Mars visitation program. Basiago claims that by the late 1970s, Tesla's teleportation technology had been developed on a larger scale into a jump room located at Hughes Aircraft Facility in Los Angeles, California, which allowed nearly instantaneous teleportation to Mars. A jump room is essentially an elevator-like device that you stand in, and while you're standing in this sort of freight elevator-like rectilinear box, it morphs into a cylinder and arrives somewhere else. Basiago claims he's been to Mars many times and observed surface water, several human types, as well as animals and plants there. According to Basiago, Major Edward Dames taught a training course to several of the participants about what to expect in terms of humanoids and predator species on the Martian surface. Basiago says he was told that the U.S. wanted to establish a defense regime located on Mars, not only to protect against possible attacks by extraterrestrials, but also to defend Earth from asteroids and other celestial objects that might collide with it. The government also sought to put as many U.S. civilians as possible on Mars, not soldiers, diplomats, or astronauts, so that a basis could be created in public international law for the United States government to later assert a claim of territorial sovereignty over Mars. Basiago claims he was one of 10 teenage participants in the program, including several people that went on to rather distinguished careers in public service. One of these alleged participants, according to Basiago, was a young Barack Obama. Basiago originally claimed he met Obama in 1982 through a mutual friend, while Basiago was a student at UCLA. At the time, Basiago says Obama was introduced to him as Barry Soetoro, as he was still using the Indonesian last name he used before later taking his father's last name, Obama. During this alleged encounter, Basiago and Obama argued about politics, after which their mutual friend told Basiago, "You'd better be nice to him because he's going to be president of the United States someday." These and other unanswered questions about Mars will give space scientists plenty to research for years to come. That curiosity is driven in part by the fact that Mars is the most accessible planet that resembles our own. So while we're homing in on other Earth-like planets in our universe that may harbor evidence of life, we're not getting to those anytime soon. Mars is within our reach.